Cancer. In this lesson, we'll be covering cancer stats, cancer hallmarks, benign versus malignant tumors, metastasis, cancer causes, types of cancer, how to prevent cancer, how to diagnose it, and then how to treat it. Now, one of the unique things about cancer is that it's one of those diseases that affects so many people that if you live long enough, you're most likely going to know someone who has dealt with cancer at some point in their life. So here's some cancer stats. Tobacco use is the cause of about 22% of cancer deaths. Another 10% are due to obesity, poor diet, lack of physical activity, or excessive drinking or alcohol. In the developing world, 15% of cancers are due to infections, hepatitis B and hepatitis C. Other factors include certain infections, exposure to ionizing radiation, and environmental pollutants. Overall, 90 to 95% of cases are due to genetic mutations from environmental and lifestyle factors. These are generally stemming from the things we just talked about. And approximately 5 to 10% of cancers are due to inherited genetic defects from a person's parents. So as you can see, cancer is most likely caused by the environment and not the genetic makeup of the person. About 14.1 million new cases of cancer occur every year. The most common type of cancer in males is lung cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, and stomach cancer. In females, the most common types are breast cancer, colorectal cancer, lung cancer, and cervical cancer. About 20% of males and 70% of females will get cancer at some point in their life, while 13% of males and 9% of females will die from it. Cancer. So what is cancer? Well, cancer is a group of diseases in which cells are growing out of control. It results from a change, a mutation in the DNA. Cancerous cells prevent the proper functioning of normal cells, and it can spread to different parts of the body. So essentially what cancer does is that it infiltrates a healthy area of the body. It changes the genetic makeup of the cells that make up that part of the body and makes those cells ineffective in doing the thing that that part of the body does. It can then spread and make other parts of the body ineffective at doing what they need to do. So a good example of that is if you get cancer in your brain, those brain cells control certain functions in your body. And if those functions are inactivated by the cancerous cells, then you won't be able to do that thing anymore. If your liver gets cancer, then your liver's not going to be able to do the liver functions that it needs to do to keep your body healthy. So really, cancer is just a starting point. It's the things that cancer causes that can result in issues for you down the line. The 6 hallmarks of cancer. So the 6 things that make cancer cancer. Number 1, the cell doesn't have the regular signals for cell growth and division. This results in number 2, continuous growth and division, even given contrary signals. So even if the body's telling it not to, it's still going to keep dividing. Number 3, avoidance of programmed cell death. Cells will typically get to a certain age and then they will be killed off. But cancer cells can avoid this so they can stick around longer. Number 4, limitless number of cell divisions. Oftentimes, as we talked about number 3, cells will be killed off at some point in their existence, or they'll be stopped from dividing. Now, cancer cells can prevent themselves from being taken out by the body, but they can also remove that limit that would otherwise be put on the number of cell divisions. So if a regular cell might be able to divide 1,000 times in its life, cancer cells will be able to divide forever. And since they're not being taken out by the body, that can produce a lot of cells. Number 5, promoting blood cell construction. So cancer cells, just like every other cell, needs its own blood supply. And what cancer cells will do is they'll go out of their way to create a specific blood supply for the cancer cells to allow them to grow faster and bigger than they would otherwise normally be able to do. And number 6, invasion of additional tissue in the body. So cancer cells, they can start in your liver and move to your kidneys. Benign versus malignant tumors. A benign tumor is a mass of cells, a tumor, that lacks the ability to invade neighboring tissues and otherwise spread throughout the body. This is also known as metastasize. They can get very large. When they're removed, benign tumors usually do not grow back, and they're generally not life-threatening unless it's in the brain. And the reason it could be life-threatening in the brain is that the pressure that those benign tumors put on the neighboring cells can cause significant life-threatening issues. Malignant tumors. A malignant tumor is a mass of cells that interferes with the functioning of neighboring cells. They can get so large that they need to create their own blood supply. Cancer cells can also break away from the original group and move throughout the body. And this is called metastasis, otherwise known as the cells have metastasized. And you can see in this diagram right here, it's a very simplistic drawing of what I mean. That if you get cancer, say, in your stomach, it can move to neighboring areas, like the lungs. So just because it's in the stomach doesn't mean it has to go somewhere near. Once it's in the blood supply, it can go anywhere. So you could have cancer in the stomach and end up with cancer in your brain, or cancer in your liver, or kidneys, or what have you. Malignant tumors. A malignant tumor invades other parts of the body via the body's bloodstream. So that's what I was just mentioning. This can lead to other kinds of cancers in the body. So again, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, that if you get, say, liver cancer, that liver cancer can easily turn into lung cancer, which can then turn into brain cancer, or bone cancer, or colorectal cancer. Any of these places that are inside the body have access to the same blood supply that the cancer cells do. And if they jump into that blood supply, as you can see in this picture here, if we have cancer cells located outside the blood supply and they make their way in, well, this blood supply is going everywhere in the body. So there's no limit to where those cancer cells can get out of the bloodstream and invade somewhere else. Causes of cancer. During cell division, the DNA is replicated. Most of the time, there are no major errors, and therefore the daughter cells are identical. And this is pretty amazing, since it's billions and billions and billions of these base pairs, that's what these guys are here, that need to be copied in order for DNA replication to occur. And really, you don't want any errors, and most of the time, the errors are insignificant, but sometimes the errors can lead to things like cancer. Now, this is very important as any error at all can compromise the entire structure and function of the DNA molecule. However, sometimes there are errors during the replication process, which leads to mutations in the DNA. Causes of cancer. Many mutations are caused by environmental factors, such as carcinogens. We talked about close to 90% are going to be the environmental factors. So, for example, tobacco smoke, radiation, sunlight, viruses such as hepatitis B. And being exposed, keep in mind, doesn't guarantee you're going to develop cancer. It simply increases your risk. You could smoke 3 packs a day and never get cancer, and then you could be exposed to some secondhand smoke and develop cancer as a result. Now let's take a look at some of the specific kinds of cancer. So first of all, lung cancer. So lung cancer is one of the most common types of cancer. Smoking causes 9 out of 10 cases of lung cancer, and smoking also increases your chance of getting other cancers, like we were talking about before, through metastasis. The cells in the lung can make their way to any parts of the body. Now, when I mentioned earlier that the cancerous cells look and function different, you can see what I mean here. This is your other lung tissue, and none of it looks terrific, I suppose, but if you take a look at that lung tissue, that looks very different from that lung tissue. This white globular lung tissue doesn't look like it has the same structure, and in biology, structure is going to equal function, and that's very important when we're talking about cancer. So structure equals function, and if you mess with the structure, you're going to mess with the function. So this graph is showing the cumulative risk of death from lung cancer. So men, women, and you're looking at the amount of cigarette use that they have and the percentage of them that will get lung cancer. So if you do more than 25 cigarettes a day, then your chance for as a man would be 25%. For a woman, it would be just under 20. And you can see how that goes up. If you only smoke 5 to 14, you're looking at more like 12 and 8. So the more you smoke, the higher your chances are of getting cancer. Now in this graph, we can see how it lags. So the time between you smoke and the time you get cancer seems to be about 20 years behind. So what the first bar here on the left, this greenish bar is the number of cigarettes that are consumed. And then the red is the chance of getting lung cancer. And you can see how they're pretty much correlated with each other. As the greeny brown goes up, the red goes up almost exactly. But there's this gap, this 20-year gap. So it looks like there's about 20 years time for those cigarettes to kind of settle into your body and promote the growth of cancerous cells. Skin cancer. Now, skin cancer seems very uninteresting and harmless. In Australia, it's considered to be the national cancer. And I was in Australia, and it's amazing to see because every 3 or 4 blocks, there's a skin cancer treatment center, like a clinic where you go in and get your skin cancer removed. It's that common. Now, skin cancer is very dangerous still. It's just like any other cancer. It can move from one part of the body to the other. So you could have skin cancer and then end up with brain cancer as a result. And you can see 3 pictures of different kinds of skin cancers. So we have our basal cell carcinoma, our squamous cell carcinoma, and our melanoma. And you can see they're all very distinct. The key to skin cancer is that if you notice anything on your body, you need to have it looked at, even if you think it might not be that important. If it looks different, make sure you get it checked out. Because although it can spread and it can be very dangerous, typically skin cancer can be taken care of pretty easily with the surgery, just taking out that skin cancer. If you get it early, just like any cancer, if you get it early, your chances of survival are higher. But the unique thing about skin cancer is that it's very visible. So if you get cancer in your stomach, it's going to be harder to know you have cancer until you start seeing the symptoms. Skin cancer, you can see almost right away that you might have something, some kind of growth, something going on, and you can get it checked out and removed before it metastasizes or gets larger. Now, skin cancer is generally caused by exposure to UV light. When you expose your skin to UV rays, whether from the sun, tanning beds, or sun lamps, you increase your chance of getting skin cancer. UV light enters the skin and rips apart the DNA, causing changes to occur. Your best defense against UV radiation is sunscreen, sunglasses, and a hat. Now, this is very important whether your skin is light or dark. You need to always protect it, so make sure you're always wearing sunscreen when you go outside during summer months. Additionally, something that people don't understand is that even if the sun is out, but there's clouds in the way, and you're outside and you think you're protected because it's not super sunny, those UV lights, so UVA and UVB, are still making their way through the clouds and hitting you. So if you're outside and it's kind of cloudy out, and it's the middle of summer and you're not wearing sunscreen because you think it's not sunny, you're exposing yourself to that UV radiation. So I thought this was very interesting because people think tanning beds are different from being outside in the sun. But this is from the Canadian Cancer Society. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies UV-emitting devices such as tanning beds as a known cancer-causing substances. This is the highest rating they can give in terms of whether the evidence shows that something causes cancer. Research shows that being exposed to UV radiation from indoor tanning equipment before the age of 35 increases your risk of melanoma skin cancer. So being in a tanning bed increases your chance of getting cancer. Leukemia. Leukemia is cancer of the body's blood-forming tissues. Some forms of leukemia are more common in children. And this is why you always hear stories of children having leukemia. It does still happen in adults, but leukemia is one of those cancers that's more likely to happen in children than other kinds of cancers are to happen in children. Leukemia usually involves the white blood cells, which your body uses to fight infection. In people with leukemia, the bone marrow produces abnormal white cells, which don't function properly. Again, structure equals function. If the structure's off, the function will be off. And if your function of your white blood cells is off, that has serious ramifications for your immune system. These leukemia cells can't fight infection the way normal white blood cells do, which can lead to life-threatening infections as well as suppress production of red blood cells. Along with infection, leukemia can cause problems like anemia, bruising, and bleeding. And this is relating to the production of red blood cells as well as other kind of blood cells that help fight these kinds of things. So leukemia not only will affect your immune system, but your other body's functions as well. Now here's some common symptoms of leukemia. Things like weight loss, fever, infections, shortness of breath, weakness, pain and tenderness in the joints. And then you're going to get discoloration of your skin, bruising, patches. You can get an enlargement in your spleen or liver, swelling in your lymph nodes, fatigue, loss of appetite. Pretty harmful thing. But again, it's really more the result of these things that can be life-threatening. So a depressed immune system can be life-threatening because the infections your body would normally be able to fight off can't be fought off, and you can succumb to those infections. Other cancers. The type of cancer depends on the location, as we were talking about before. Brain cancer is cancer of the brain, lung cancer is cancer of the lung, etc. The 10 most common cancers in the US are skin cancer, we've talked about that one, lung cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, colorectal cancer, kidney cancer, bladder cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, thyroid cancer, and endometrial cancer. Teratoma. Teratoma means monster tumor. This is a growth inside the body so large it can develop hair and teeth, and it can be very significant. So I do encourage you to watch this video, but I do want to warn you that it can be a little disturbing. So make sure if you're a little squeamish about these kinds of things, maybe don't watch this video, but it is a very interesting thing. On a side note, I have a friend who had a teratoma. It didn't necessarily grow teeth and hair, but it was a very significant tumor that needed to be removed, and it was life-threatening. Thankfully, she is okay, though. Cancer prevention. So why take the chance when you can do something about it? What can we do to reduce our risk of developing cancer? So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and I want you to write down 5 things you think someone could do to help reduce their chances of cancer. So according to the Mayo Clinic, here are the 7 main ways you can reduce your chances of getting cancer. Number 1, don't use tobacco. This includes using any kind of tobacco as well as staying away from secondhand smoke. Number 2, a healthy diet. Eat plenty of fruits and vegetables. Limit the amount of alcohol you drink. Number 3, be physically active and maintain a healthy weight. Try to do at least 150 minutes a week of moderate aerobic activity or 75 minutes a week of vigorous aerobic activity. Moderate aerobic activity, guys, can be something as simple as going for a walk. And 150 minutes is not that long. You think it's about 2.5 hours of activity per week, per 7 days. It's really not a whole lot to ask, and it's really, really good for you. Number 4, protect yourself from the sun. So we've already mentioned this. When you're outside in the sun, whether it's cloudy or not, in the middle of summer, you need to take care of yourself. Skin cancer is one of the most common kinds of cancer, and it's also one of the most preventable. Wear your hat, wear your sunglasses, wear your sunscreen. Number 5, get vaccinated. Certain viruses can cause cancer. Getting vaccinated protects you against these kinds of infections, which prevents you from that kind of cancer. Number 6, avoid risky behaviors. Certain diseases, like sexually transmitted diseases, can increase your risk of infections that in turn might increase the risk of cancer. Number 7, get regular medical care. Regular self-exams and self-checks can increase your chances of discovering cancer early. Screening for cancer means looking for cancer before there are symptoms. Now I mentioned that skin cancer is one of the most easily treatable if you catch it early, because you can just lop it off. Now, it's very easy to detect skin cancer in most cases because it's so visible, it's right on the surface. But things like stomach cancer, colorectal cancer are much harder to diagnose before those symptoms come about. So getting those regular checkups can help catch these things early on. Early detection. This is especially important if you have a family history of cancer. The sooner your doctor finds the cancer, the greater your chances are for survival. Common diagnostic tests. Now, how do we diagnose cancer? Well, number 1, an endoscope. An endoscope is simply a long tube with a camera at the end. So if you think of it, you look through this tube, and this tube has a little camera at the end, which looks inside your body. For instance, you can stick this tube down your mouth, down your esophagus, and have a look inside your stomach without cutting you open, which is a lot better. It's a lot less invasive. The recovery time is almost negligible, and it's a much easier way of seeing what's going on without physically cutting someone open. X-rays are an imaging technique that allows the doctor to view images of parts of the body. Generally, the doctor will look for shadows, which indicate abnormal growths. So this is an X-ray of lungs. Now, these lungs look pretty good. You might see a little something right there. That might be a little something. It might not. But generally, you'll see something inside the photograph that might indicate it. And this might be a little shadow, or maybe a little bit more of an enlarged white area. Something like that. If the doctor sees a bit more something like this on the photo, that might indicate that cancer is present in that area of the lungs. And then they can go in and have a better look. Ultrasounds, however, create a digital image of soft body tissue such as your heart and your liver, and can give a little bit better of an idea of what's going on. CT or CAT scans, which stands for computerized axial tomography, is taking multiple X-rays from different angles to create a detailed image of areas inaccessible by normal X-rays. So it's pretty much like a super X-ray, if you will. MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, uses radio waves and a strong magnetic field to create images more detailed than a CT, which then can be assembled into a 3D picture. Again, we're able to look on the inside without cutting the person open and physically looking on the inside. Diagnostic tests. The physical exam, lab, and imaging tests may identify an abnormality, but a biopsy is the only sure way to know whether cancer is present. In a biopsy, the doctor removes a sample of tissue from the abnormal area. A pathologist will examine the tissue under a microscope to see whether cancer cells are present or not. And here's an example of what it might look like. So here's an adenocarcinoma from the stomach. And they're going to take a look at this and they're going to see whether the cells look normal or whether they look abnormal. Cancer treatments. So once cancer has been identified, we need to treat it. The goal of any cancer treatment is to slow down the growth of the tumor or destroy as much of it as possible. There are three main techniques for this: surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. Surgery. If the tumor is accessible, like our skin cancer example, the first and typically best step is to simply cut it out. If you cut it out and you get rid of those cancerous cells and you get them all, then the cancer will be gone and it won't grow back. Chemotherapy. Chemotherapy treats cancer using drugs. These drugs slow or stop the cancerous cells from dividing and attempt to kill them. Now, chemotherapy can be considered very disruptive to your life. It can cause side effects, but it is still one of our main ways of treating cancer. Now, oftentimes doctors will combine chemotherapy and surgery just to make sure that they get all those cancer cells. Drugs can be injected or taken in pill form, and the side effects include things like hair loss, nausea, and fatigue. So why do you think this is? The drugs travel throughout the body, killing all detected as well as undetected tumors. Radiation. Radiation therapy uses high-energy radiation, X-rays, gamma rays, and charged particles to kill cancer cells by damaging their DNA. It's kind of like using UV light to cause cancer in the first place by damaging your DNA, except we're going to specifically target those cancer cells and we're going to rip through them with our high-energy radiation. Radiation therapy can also damage normal cells, however, as well as cancer cells. Therefore, treatment must be carefully planned to minimize side effects. So they're going to really narrow in as much as possible on those cancer cells, just try to zap the bad cells and leave the healthy cells. Now, along with our traditional techniques, there are emerging treatments out there as well. First one we're going to talk about is cancer immunotherapy. And this is where doctors are going to stimulate the body's own immune system to treat the cancer. CRISPR, otherwise known as cluster regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, uses gene editing to alter a patient's DNA. It's very effective as it identifies the specific mutations in a patient's genes which cause the cancer and subsequently removes them. So CRISPR essentially identifies what's causing the cancer, fixes it, and removes the bad cells. It's a pretty fantastic way to do it if you can get it right. And then lastly, vaccines to treat cancer. These vaccines, which are made up of cancer cells or antigens, are made to recognize proteins on certain cancer cells. This helps the immune system to recognize and attack those cells. Now, all three of these are in trial phases, and doctors are doing different things with them and seeing some success. They are probably the future. Things like surgery, chemotherapy are pretty barbaric in terms of attacking the body's good cells and bad cells. In the future, we'll probably see a whole range of different treatments that encompass both the emerging techniques and the traditional techniques to create a specific and personalized cancer treatment plan that's effective for everyone. And that concludes our lesson on cancer.